And the City Council just met on one closed session item, and there's nothing to report out at this time. So thank you everyone for joining us for the April 21st regular meeting of the Arcata City Council. The City Council meeting is being held as a teleconference in response to local efforts to reduce the spread of the COVID-19 virus. We want to encourage everyone to keep up the efforts to slow the spread of COVID-19 in Arcata. We know that by wearing masks and practicing social distancing, we can reduce the spread and keep our businesses open. So please support our businesses by masking up in Arcata. If you wish to make public comment during the meeting, either at the 2 open public comment periods or for an individual agenda item, there are 2 ways to do so. If you are logged onto the Zoom meeting webinar, click on Raise Your Hand on the right-hand side of your screen. When it is time for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, the clerk will unmute you and you will have 2 minutes to comment. Secondly, you can access this meeting by phone. Call the number at the bottom of the screen, enter the meeting ID also at the bottom of the screen, press *9 on your phone. This will raise your hand. When it is time for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, the clerk will unmute your phone. You will hear a prompt that will indicate that your phone is unmuted and you will have 2 minutes to comment. And with that, please, if you would like to join me for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. And will the city clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Pereira.
Here.
Vice Mayor Watson.
Here.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar.
Here.
Councilmember Goldstein.
Here.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Here.
All present.
Great, thank you. Next on our agenda, we have ceremonial matters, and I will read a proclamation in recognition of Bike Month, May 2021. Whereas millions of people bicycle to work, school, social gatherings, and to do errands because it is an inexpensive and environmentally sound form of travel, as well as an excellent form of exercise and family recreation. And whereas bicycling addresses the global problems of climate change, oil dependence, and air and noise pollution. It reduces traffic and parking congestion and noise and increases physical activity and public health. And whereas the City of Arcata promotes programs that encourage bicycling and educates cyclists and motorists on how to share the road so all users feel safe. These initiatives earned Arcata a bicycle-friendly community silver award in 2019 and a bicycle-friendly business, being City Hall, bronze award in 2020. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the City Council of the City of Arcata that May 2021 is Bike Month throughout Arcata. The council encourages everyone to participate in Bike Month activities, encourages the installation of bicycle parking and other facilities to support Arcata's growing number of bicyclists, and encourages people to bicycle as a means of transportation this and every month. So thank you. Okay, we don't have any report by commission or committee. So next we will move on to early oral communications. This is a 15-minute time period provided for people to address the council on matters that are not on tonight's agenda. At the conclusion of all oral communications, the council may respond to statements. Any request that requires council action will be set by the council for a future agenda or referred to staff. Speakers addressing the council at this time are limited to 2 minutes, and we can take up to 7 speakers. So please raise your hand if you are on Zoom, or press *9 if you are calling in by phone and wish to make a comment. Do we have any public comment for items that are not on tonight's agenda?
We do not have any public comment.
Okay, thank you. So next on our agenda, we have the consent calendar. All matters on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the City Council and are enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion of any of these items. If discussion is required, that item is removed from the consent calendar and considered separately. At the end of the reading of the consent calendar, council members or members of the public can request that an item be removed for separate discussion. So I'll go ahead and read through these items. Item A, approve the minutes of the City Council meeting of April 7th, 2021. B, biweekly report on general warrants. C, ratify employment agreement with Emily R. Sinkhorn for Director of Environmental Services. D, approve appointment at step 4 for new Assistant City Engineer, David F. Case. E, adopt resolution number 201-50, authorizing participation in the California Intergovernmental Risk Authority, CIRA, Joint Powers Authority for the city's workers' compensation program. F, award the contract for Larson Park Tennis Court resurfacing to First Serve Productions Incorporated in the amount of $40,000 and authorize the city manager to execute all applicable documents. G, adopt resolution number 201-48, authorizing the execution of the certifications and assurances and authorized agent forms for the Low Carbon Transit Operations Program, LCTOP, for the following projects. A and MRTS free fares in the amount of $11,531 and partial funding for electric buses in the amount of $149,146. And lastly, item H, adopt resolution number 20149, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Arcata accepting the 2020 General Plan Annual Progress Report. Is there any member of the public or staff that requests an item be removed from the consent calendar?
I am not showing any on public.
Okay. Is there any request from the council? Okay. Well, then I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I will call the vote by roll call. Councilmember Atkins Salazar.
Aye.
Councilmember Goldstein.
Aye.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Watson.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Motion passes. Okay, next we are on to old business. Consider amending the short stay vacation rental ordinance and fee structure. Given that this is an item that I need to recuse myself on, I'm going to turn this over to Vice Mayor Watson, and I will be back.
All right, do we have a staff report, please?
Yeah, good evening, Vice Mayor and council members. For you tonight is a recommendation for a minor revision to the short stay vacation rental ordinance that we recently adopted. We now have a little over a month's worth of implementation under our belts, and we've identified some potential areas for improvement and as well as maybe some areas for amendment. So we'd like you to consider these proposed amendments tonight. And really the action item is under the recommendation section, bullet number 3, and that is to introduce ordinance number 1545, waive reading the text, consent to read by title only, if you choose to do so. We also have another item to consider, amendments to the fee resolution that would allow us to establish a fee for taking in applications that will ultimately be placed on a wait list, because there is time involved in establishing and maintaining a wait list, but not as much time as actually issuing a permit. So we've added some flexibility there. The action that we're asking you to take tonight will make changes to the program identified in the implementation as either inconsistent with what staff understood to be council's original intent, or is needed to close loopholes or to further clarify the terms. So let's just start with the first one. The exemption that the council established for long-term tenancy from the cap was a way of saying, look, if you live on the property or if you rent long-term tenants on the property, but you need to do this activity for whatever reason, you want to do this activity doing short stay rentals, then you would be exempt from the cap because you're still providing long-term tenancy to the community, which was one of the core tenets for adopting this cap in the first place. The way that the language is written currently, it would require that the vacation rental actually be inside the unit, not on the same property, but inside the physical unit that the long-term tenant stays in order to qualify for the cap. And so I wanted to open the discussion and ensure that our understanding that the council's original intent was that if there was long-term tenancy on the site, somewhere on the site, you had a mother-in-law unit that you were renting out as a vacation rental, but you lived in the main house or whatever the combination of factors were, that was subject to a limitation or an exemption from the cap. So that exemption, if we could just take these in pieces to make it simple to understand, I think if the council could give us some direction on that piece. So was it the council's intention to allow an exemption from the cap if there was long-term tenancy somewhere on the property?
Okay, go ahead.
I believe that was our original, that was the intent. It didn't have to be, it wasn't a vacation rental inside of the house. So yeah, that's my recollection.
So you were saying, well, first let me ask Councilmember Goldstein, do you have any comments or questions?
No, because I don't completely remember. I think the issue is that we didn't specifically talk about this. I think we kind of just moved forward. I don't know if we had set an intention, so I don't know if I could say which way we were actually intending to go.
Go ahead, Councilmember Schaefer.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, that we had talked about the intent just being that on a single property, that, that idea, if there's mother-in-law unit, and I feel like a lot of the public comment, people said, look, I just rent out this little space in my back. It's not really fit to be a long-term rental, or I've curated this space, especially to be a vacation rental so I can operate it. And so, I was under the impression that we had kind of discussed the idea, if the owner or there is long-term tenant on the property, whether that be, a room in a house or a mother-in-law unit, I think both of those would qualify under that, being exempt from the cap.
That makes perfect sense to me. I didn't have a super clear memory, but I appreciate you, both of you reiterating for me.
Yeah, that sounds fine with me.
Okay, that was staff's understanding, but unfortunately, the way we drafted the ordinance originally, it would require them to be in the same unit. So ordinance 1545 fixes that and makes it so as long as the long-term tenancy is on the lot that the vacation rental is on, they would then be exempt from the cap. Another amendment that is combined with that or tied at the hip with that is that we've added the definition of lot, because there was some confusion over what that could potentially mean. So that's an easy clarifying component. So the second big factor that we want you to weigh in on is the way we had originally drafted the ordinance is that there would be a grace period for existing operators. We know some operators we know who they are because they have a business license and they have TOT. And so we've counted those, and we think that there are about 80 in the mid 80s total number of vacation rentals in operation in the city of Arcata that we know about. We also may have other operators that we don't know about, but the council discussed allowing those existing operators that had ongoing business concerns, but hadn't yet come into, for whatever reason, they didn't know it was a requirement or they were purposefully evading the system. We were going to allow them a grace period to come in and get a permit. And if that permit bumped our total number up to over 100, we would issue permits to all existing operators to just level the playing field. If we're over 100, then as those operators start to whittle down, we would eventually get below 100 and we'd start issuing new permits. If we were below 100, there were new operators that wanted to come online after that grace period, then we would allow them to come online and get a permit until we reach that 100 cap. The way that we wrote that was that as of the effect of the adopted date, the grace period would start. And so there was a 30-day gap between when the regulation was introduced and when it was adopted. And we've had some people come in and establish operations in that 30-day period. Technically, under the ordinance right now, they are existing operators by definition, according to what we've adopted. I don't think it's a huge issue, but I wanted the council to take specific policy, direction on it, because they did sort of give people a grace period to come in line. Anyone who started their operations in this 30-day period right now gets in through a loophole as an existing operator, but they certainly weren't the types of existing operators that the council had discussed allowing to come in under the permit cap. I don't know if it's really going to have an impact. Right now, we have about 13 applications. We've issued 3 permits. And of those 13, I would say a handful, maybe 4 or 5, we know are definitely waitlisted because they weren't existing operators. And one of those 13 kind of falls into this gray area, into this loophole where they establish their operations during that 30-day period. So just wanted to get some direction whether or not we should change that section or not. And that is reflected in packet page starting on 53 under subsection E. So instead of allowing for the 12-month period prior to the adoption, it would be just in 2020.
Really quick, do we have any members of the public that want to comment on this item?
Checking if any attendees wish to speak on this item. I do not see any public comment on this item.
All right, Councilmember Goldstein.
I would just say that I think our intention when we had talked about this before, it sounds like there is like this gray area that you're describing, which would allow people to quickly rush to get their permit and then be grandfathered in. And I don't think that was at all our intention. I think it was to have grace and grant, grant permission to people who had, as you said, previously been operating, and for whatever reason, we're not asking questions, whatever reason they didn't have the permit. So I would say I'm not comfortable with this like kind of gray area loophole, and that I'd like the exemptions or the like grandfathering in to only include our original intention.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think that was also the original intention. As you had said, Director Loya, it does, create a loophole that could be taken advantage of. It sounds like also it is not that many applicants have capitalized on this loophole anyway. So I tend to agree with Councilmember Goldstein that we should just kind of start it in that for those operating in 2020, which makes sense. Yeah.
And Councilmember Atkins-Salazar. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. And also just thinking, I mean, that number isn't very great because, how many people started operating an Airbnb in the middle of a pandemic? It seems a little suspect, to be starting that, directly after this too. So, I mean, you can see that the intent of, applying them was to be grandfathered in as well. So, sorry. Anyway, thank you.
Councilmember Atkins-Salazar.
I agree with both council members Goldstein and Schaefer. We should close the loophole.
And I also agree.
Okay. The one other potential amendment that I'll bring to your attention that's not included in the draft right now, and so if you want to take action on this, we would have to amend the draft. In coordination with the finance department, this is a very collaborative effort between community development and finance. Some questions were raised about why are we not just issuing permits? Why are we waiting for this grace period? Because right now we only have 84 that we know about, and so on and so forth. And so we've been having discussions about that. And they pointed out that, look, if we just let people come in until we get to that cap, we'll have more TOTs sooner. So it's kind of like a revenue generation thing that they've been talking about. I think based on, the deliberations that you had, retaining the grace period makes a lot of sense. If we allow people to come in, and just apply and we go up to the cap, it's possible that some of the existing operators would be excluded if we don't allow them the grace period. But to address the concerns that finance has had, or some of the observations that finance department has had, the council could consider reducing the term of that grace period from 6 months, which would end in September, to 3 months. And so instead of giving people 6 months to get their act together and get in and apply to us, submit all their paperwork and their fee, we could potentially gain 3 months of potentially new rental TOT if we shorten that period. If we in fact have only 84 operators and some proportion of those are exempt from the cap, we may get let's say another 30 or 40 units online that potentially could generate TOT revenue. So if you're interested in doing that, I will identify the specific section under that subsection E that needs to be amended in your introduction to allow for a 3-month instead of a 6-month grace period.
All right, do we have any, Councilmember Atkins Salazar, do you have any comments?
As nice as it would be to have 3 more extra months of possible TOT, I think that we should probably stick to the 6 months that we established, just in good faith. Or if we do decide to shorten it, then I think I would want to make sure that we somehow were able to reach out to those people, which I don't think we would be able to do. I just am worried that people aren't going to be following and go to apply 4 or 5 months later and then get upset because we've shortened it. But that's my main concern.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Schaefer.
So I'm kind of maybe just then confused a little bit, but so what I don't understand is, I mean, I understand that we have this grace period, but then if somebody did apply, say, 4 months down the line, even 8 months down the line, but we can see that they had been operating in 2020, for having TOT on the books, then wouldn't we be able to issue them a permit anyway, because they would not be, they would be excluded from that cap?
No, they're only excluded if they come in the first 6-month period. Then, and after that so everybody who's operating, not knowing, if we've had a lot of people operating and not paying us TOT, anybody who's been operating and wants to continue has a 6-month grace period. So it only becomes an issue if those existing businesses come in and then new ones come in that make us reach the cap. And then an older business comes in. So, I mean, right now we don't have a situation in front of us where we're reaching the 100 cap, but we do suspect that by the end of the 6 months, we will reach the cap, I think.
Okay. Then, yeah, I tend to think that I would go the same direction as Councilmember Atkins Salazar, just that, this is what we had originally intended. This is kind of also was a slight compromise I think we made to a lot of the people that were a little upset with this ordinance as well, as a way to, in good faith say, hey, but we're going to give you a chance to get in. We want you to continue operating. We appreciate, the operation you're doing. So to kind of bridge that, I think it's appropriate to maintain that 6 months that we had previously spoken about. Yeah.
Councilmember Goldstein.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this, again, that was our original intention when we had the conversation. And there was a lot of folks that came to that council meeting, or maybe multiple council meetings, to give public comment. And we already asked for public comment on this item and no one's here tonight. So I would feel more comfortable just staying with what we had agreed upon when we did get input from the public.
I also agree.
All right, I have just one more amendment that I'd like to ask for. As I was reading through and trying to catch all the places where that 6-month time frame would be amended, I realized that section E and F are actually duplicated twice. For some reason, it didn't didn't delete section E and F and replace them. So what I'm going to ask is that the ordinance also be amended, this draft that's before you, to strike E and F and make G, current G, section E, and current H, section F. It's in there twice, doesn't need to be.
Can we just,
Apologize.
can we just eliminate G and F and G?
The amendments are in F and G.
Oh, okay, I see.
It could have been that easy, but so that's those are the main ordinance issues. And then if the fee resolution, which now apparently has a number 201-51, if you would like us to adopt that, then we'll bring that back under consent along with the adoption of this ordinance and notice it appropriately.
So go ahead.
I apologize. You're complete with public comment on this item, correct?
Yeah, do we have any? We can check one more time. Anybody else?
Looks like we may have one.
All right.
Okay. Rebecca, did you want to make a public comment on this item?
Nope, I accidentally pressed my hand up. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So just to be clear, you need some motions, right? Or a motion?
I need a motion to introduce ordinance number 1545, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Arcata amending Article 3 in Chapter 2, Title 6 of the Arcata Municipal Code to regulate short stay and vacation rentals, waive reading the text, and consent to read by title only, with the amendment noted to strike E and F and change G to E and H to F.
Right. Do we have a motion?
I move to do what Director Loya just said.
All right.
Does that work?
I
I'll
second.
second that. Oh, go ahead.
All right. We have a motion and a second. I'll call the vote. Councilmember Goldstein,
Aye.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
Aye.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Aye.
I vote aye. And then now do we need a second motion for resolution 201-51 or no? Okay, that's coming back from consent. Okay.
Yep.
All right, thanks everybody. We'll hand the meeting back to Mayor Pereira.
Should be coming on momentarily. For just a second here.
Hi, everyone. Okay, next we are on to old business, item B. Adopt resolution number 201-45, authorizing $743,790 for 2 applications for the coronavirus response community development block grants, round 2 and 3 funding. May we have a staff report from Community Development Director Loya?
Yeah, good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. This item before you tonight would reauthorize an application for the city's Community Development Block Grant COVID 2-3 round funding application. These aren't competitive applications, they're just allocations as long as you have an eligible activity. We did discuss this at your last meeting, and this is a continued hearing item, so I won't belabor the point. But I will note that along with the action to adopt the resolution by motion, if you could also authorize the city manager to negotiate and execute a memorandum of understanding with Fortuna for half of their allocation, which is also included as attachment B. The only things that I will add to the staff report tonight are that the Arcata House Partnership Homeless Services that we described last time The total amount for that funding is $629,410 that will assist both the city of Arcata and Fortuna for similar services. And the COVID safe outdoor events, which we're still honing in on the specifics for that program, will fund $114,380 to help the city of Arcata get outdoor events that are COVID safe operational and running again. And again, we'll be operating that with a subrecipient agreement similar to the Arcata House Partnership one, where Arcata House Partnership will actually be doing most of the legwork. The fiscal impact for the city on these is that 13% of those total funds will be used for the city's administration of these programs. So with that, we'd ask that you adopt resolution number 201-45 and authorize the city manager to negotiate and execute an MOU with Fortuna.
Great, thank you. I'll now ask for questions from the council, starting with Vice Mayor Watson.
No questions or comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar.
No questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Schaefer.
No questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Goldstein.
No questions. Thank you.
I don't have any as well, but do we have any members of the public waiting to comment on this item?
Checking if there are any members of the public that would like to comment. We have no public comment on this item.
Okay, thank you. Well, I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 201-45, authorizing the submission of the city's CDBG-CB23 applications, as well as to authorize the city manager to negotiate and execute an MOU with the city of Fortuna.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'll call the vote by roll call. Vice Mayor Watson.
Aye.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar.
Aye.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Aye.
Councilmember Goldstein.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay.
I just wanted to just quickly say thank you to the city of Fortuna for finding a creative way to keep this really important money local to our region when they realized that because of some, expenditure complexities with CDBG that they weren't going to be eligible to keep the money directly right in Fortuna, but to find a way to keep it within our region was really commendable, and just wanted to thank them for that.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time to recognize our partners in the friendly city. This was definitely an act of friendship, and we appreciate the partnership too. Okay, on to new business. We have item A, consider a letter to the Humboldt County Planning Commission regarding the Arcata Land Company LLC's proposed cannabis project in the Arcata Bottoms. May I have a staff report from City Manager Deemer?
Yes. On the April 7th, at your last City Council meeting, you requested an agenda item to consider sending a letter to elevate the concerns raised by Arcata residents regarding Arcata Land Company LLC's proposed cannabis project just west of town in the Arcata Bottom. As the project continues to change, the project has reduced in size originally from 22.9 acres down to at least a cultivation space of 8 acres now. And so we had drafted a letter for all of you to look at. This item came up during report out at the very end of the council meeting. So you have not had a chance to talk as a council about the exact contents of your letter, but based on several of the emails that individual council members forwarded me that they had received from constituents and the limited conversation you had, we did draft a letter that I thought I would just pull up on the screen when you're ready, Mayor, and we can work to edit that as the council sees fit. I did let the applicant also know that the project would be discussed by the council tonight. I don't see the names of the couple of members that I know from the project that we would have sent that invitation to, but if there is an applicant from the Arcata Land Company here that would be able to answer questions, please raise your hand in the attendee and I will let the council know that you're here, but I don't think we have an applicant here I also wanted to share that the Transportation Safety Committee did review this item at the TSC last night. And I think at the end of the day, realized that they just did not have enough detail to make a real informed decision and recommendation to you. There were a couple of things that they thought the project should consider, and that was incentivizing through stipends, bike donations, free bus tickets, alternative transportation options for staff coming to work, providing a Class 1 bike and pedestrian trail along the project site on Foster Avenue, similar to what we will have from Creekside. This was also a request that the city had made to the project, as we had just finalized the Creekside project and the trail that was going to be. So the project applicant, we know, is familiar with what the location of that trail would be for the continuation of it. And they've asked also to provide an easement for bike and pedestrians along the property that will connect Foster Avenue, 27th Street, and Upper Bay Road. Recognizing that Foster is heavily used by local bicyclists and joggers. From the project that they saw in front of them, encourage more bicycle parking on site, and that parking should be covered with appropriate security and locking. So those were some additional comments from TSC just last night.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm going to open up to you for any questions or initial comments from the council, starting with Councilmember Schaefer.
Great, yeah. I guess just comment wise, I really do like the points of this letter, and the concerns that it raises are valid, they're important, and definitely, I think I've received overwhelming public comment, in regards to this project. I think it's important to make sure that we do, come to it with a view that, this is a conditional use permit, and that if it is granted to this project, that they are going to need to mitigate these concerns that were raised, especially things that are, that make sense on the surface, such as smell, such as light, and also concerns about water and just impacts to the neighborhood. And I think it's important to, bring all these voices that we've heard into this conversation, and stand behind them, because they are our constituents and they are valid concerns, and to make sure that the project has thoroughly done the report and seen the impacts and are ready and have a list of things that need to be mitigated if this project is approved. I guess questions that I might wait on those, but yeah, I mean, that's just kind of where I stand right now. I don't know what. And as far as direction right now, it looks like we have kind of 2 closing paragraphs in this letter to discuss. Right now, I feel that the first one really does, get that view of, look, these are valid concerns that, look at the environmental analysis. How deep did it go? Do we need to have an environmental impact report done? Does it need to go further? Have they done their due diligence? And just, kind of put that on the planning commission and say, hey, please, look at this process and make sure that you have done what you are supposed to do to help, protect the constituents, the citizens of our city, that we, though it is in the county, it is largely going to affect the people living in our community. So I think that our voice is important in this. And just really making sure that it is clear that these are the issues that citizens are concerned about, and that if this project is approved, these are the things that need to be mitigated. So I'll leave it there for right now, but thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Goldstein.
Well, I fully agree with everything that Councilmember Schaefer said. I think you took the words right out of my mouth. You said it beautifully. I think that, yeah, we've received so many concerned emails and phone calls from our constituents, and this really is going to have an impact on Arcata, despite us as a council not actually really having decision-making power for this project. And so I think the letter is really beautifully written and makes some great points. I just want to make sure that we come at this, you know, from a strong standpoint that we are standing up for the people of Arcata, because I think there is a lot of very valid worry around this project.
Thank you. Councilmember Atkins Salazar.
Both council members Schaefer and Goldstein did a great job of summarizing their thoughts on the letter, and I agree with both of them. It was really well done, and my personal biggest concerns are the environmental impacts. So I just want to be, you know, sure that that's really being looked at. So.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Watson.
I also agree with all the comments from my fellow council members. The only, I don't think it was in the letter, one of the comments I've seen from a couple people is that this is just one application of several applications, and there's multiple 8-acre grows being proposed in that area, and to add just a little bit of language requesting that the county consider the cumulative impacts of multiple 8-acre grows. And that also, my understanding is that the county would be getting revenue from this project through Measure S, and that we request something like maybe like 25% of that revenue to offset the impacts to city infrastructure and neighborhoods.
Thank you. Agree with everything that's been said. I'm just kind of absorbing some of the feedback that was just here. And maybe after public comment, when we can kind of go into the letter, there's a couple potential recommendations to kind of address what you were talking about, Vice Mayor Watson, that we could put in. So why don't I open up to public comment?
We do have public comment. We'll go ahead and cue our first speaker, which is Colin. Colin, you'll have 2 minutes if you want to go ahead.
Thank you. This is Colin Fisk speaking on behalf of the Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities. I just wanted to say, I think that the TSC recommendations that City Manager Deemer laid out there were well thought out and important. So I encourage you, if you're going to send a letter, to include those in it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're going to have a phone-in caller, call-in user 1, and then after that will be Rebecca. Phone caller, can you go ahead, please? Yes.
Hi.
Hi, go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Lee Torrance. I'm in Arcata. I heard you mention earlier in the meeting that that Arcata received a bike award, and you sounded really proud of that, and you encouraged all of Arcata residents to use bicycles this month and always. I'm assuming that's to help reduce emissions from vehicles. And I also heard you mention in the agenda that there's some kind of a low carbon transit project in the works. So this is Arcata, and this is the Arcata I know and love. And I'm wondering how we can improve this Sun Valley to grow 8 acres of cannabis. It's a recreational drug. It's not something we can eat. And it's going to use 2.4% of what the entire county uses daily just for the grow lights. And that doesn't include the energy needed for fans and filtration systems. And last week I read an article in the Times Standard about the drought happening in California. And it said that the U.S. Department of Agriculture just recently declared a drought disaster for 50 counties in California. This makes food growers who've been struggling with parched conditions eligible to seek federal loans. The article breaks down a map of California into levels of drought, and inland from us is in severe drought, and we on the coast are considered to be under moderate drought, but we get our water from inland, so I find that to be concerning. The water aquifer in Fresno is almost depleted, and I'm afraid that if this 8-acre grow is approved, others will follow. And there are already 3 others in the works within 1 mile radius of Sun Valley. I emailed those grows that were in the mitigated negative declaration that Sun Valley initially put out. So I'm just wondering how much energy and water does Arcata feel comfortable for these grows that are seeking permits? If we're concerned about getting residents to ride bikes to reduce emissions, then why wouldn't we be concerned about this huge carbon footprint that grows will leave? So please, I'm begging you, ask for an environmental impact. My husband would like to speak. Is that possible?
Yeah.
Done. Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's another speaker.
Yeah. Hi, thank you very much. My name is David Mormon. I live on 27th Street in Arcata. During the last public meeting, I spoke about Sun Valley's reputation using harmful pesticides. And today, I just like to focus on the potential traffic problems with Lane DeVries' proposed mega cannabis site. When Sun Valley expanded their operation in the early 1990s, they began using 27th Street, where I live, to access the back of their property. This entrance had never been mentioned during the Arcata City Council meetings, all of which I'd attended. And soon, you know, our narrow little road became a pathway for these huge dump trucks full of soil speeding down to dump their loads at the bulb farm. I talked to Mr. DeVries. He appeared to understand my concerns, and the traffic lowered quite a bit for a while. But the following year, there were more trucks, and every year since, that kind of traffic has increased, and it's just so destructive for this little road of ours. And that brings me to this new venture of the Arcata Land Company. The entry to this proposed mega cannabis site is Foster Street. I've heard no mention of using 27th Street. My history with Mr. DeVries makes me question what will actually happen, you know, should the grow be approved. The proposed hoop houses would stretch to 27th, so why not just use it again without permission? So I guess I want that to be part of this legal record, that should this mega grow be approved, which I hope it isn't, there must be granted no access whatsoever from 27th Street. Our community, which is already subject to all the downsides of this project, noise, odor, etc., would be severely and unjustly burdened by the addition of more truck traffic. We're angry, we feel disrespected, and we demand that our peaceful lives not be sacrificed for the growing of marijuana. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, do we have another speaker?
We do. Rebecca, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Thank you, City Council. First, I did want to thank everyone for moving forward and writing this letter and recognizing the importance of this project and its adjacency to the City of Arcata. So I really wanted to just reach out and thank the council. I would request that the eventual letter be read into the record tomorrow because of the timing. You know, the planning commissioners won't necessarily have a time to get a good look at it, and I think it's more impactful if it comes from the city. The reduction in size has been mentioned a couple of times. You know, I've reviewed the staff reports and the different documents. My concerns are that really the change in size doesn't address any of the potentially significant impacts. They still lack evidence for their finding of no significant impact, specifically in regards to public drinking water supplies. They're relying on neighboring parcels for the storage of pesticides, fertilizers, and hazardous materials. That parcel isn't acknowledged as part of the project, as opposed to where they've got a well adjacent that they're using. And in this update, they added that well to the project. I think that parcel where they're going to store hazardous materials should be part of the project. The project eventually drains to Liscombe Slough. If you read their hydrology reports, there is the potential for release into our nearby waters. So just really encourage and support the city to require the county to do the appropriate environmental studies so that we can ensure that this doesn't have a negative impact. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Checking if, oh, we do have another public comment. Jim, do you want to go ahead, please? Jim, can you unmute yourself? There you go. You have 2 minutes, please. We can't hear you if you're talking. You're unmuted, but we're not hearing you. I think we might be having some difficulties with his connection, maybe. I'm sorry, Jim, we are not able to hear you.
Should we see if there's any other public comment while Jim works to fix his technical issue?
Checking if there is any other public comment on this item. Don't see. Oh, here we go. A phone caller. Can you go ahead, please? Call in user 2.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Hi, this is Joanne McGarry. I'm finally able to connect after a few times earlier in the meeting. I just continue to want to remind the City Council that Arcata has declared a climate emergency, and issues such as this cannabis grow, if we think global, act local, the United Nations has just issued a startling report on how we globally need to cut our emissions, and a cannabis grow of this size and its resource consumption goes nowhere near adequately dealing with the climate emergency that we are all facing on the planet, and we can narrow it down to our region here in Humboldt and to our community of Arcata. And so I just want the council to recognize that they have declared a climate emergency. So any type of project like this is just counter to any type of work we're doing to lower our carbon emissions. So there's just no way that the city of Arcata should allow this project to go through, and the county. And using the declaration of climate emergency would be my recommendation. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kim. Go ahead, Kim.
That's you, Jim. Good evening. This is Jim Cotton. I'm on another computer.
Great.
Thanks for the opportunity to addressing the council tonight. I wanted to emphasize that I believe that because of the size and the location of this project, it truly needs an EIR for multiple reasons. And there seems to be quite a few contradictory statements in the last staff reports in terms of both air quality and odor. In the final EIR that was drafted in January of 2018, it clearly states that during the harvest season, the impacts from particulate matter at the 10 micron level was cumulatively considerable, significant, and unavoidable. And the same can be said for the odors. And it just points to the fact that I believe that a lot of these decisions may be made without having data behind them, and that's the reason that we need an EIR. Another example is under the biological assessments that SHN did. They excluded doing a bat survey, which is required under CEQA. So all said, I do believe that an EIR is justified, and that this mega grow, is in the wrong location because of both the cost to the community and the environmental cost. Imagine taking 8 football fields and stretching a plastic dome over it and having to create a total artificial environment by pumping in heat through 3 million BTUs per hour, and the energy impact from just the lights alone that was mentioned earlier is enough to heat 1,500 standard homes in the Pacific Northwest. It really needs an EIR. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Jim. Checking if there's any additional public comment on this item. Seeing no further public comment, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, are there any final comments from the council. I did have some recommended language. I don't know if other folks have some recommended language that they would want to incorporate before we go to any motion. So if anyone has recommendations, I definitely want to defer to you all first. Or any other comments?
Yeah, I would say, because I previously had asked for some language addressing climate change. And I know we did have a conversation about impacts on the water table and also impacts on Liscombe Slough, and, you know, how water is going to affect this. Though now when I was looking at data, I don't have the most up-to-date, you know, effects of what the water usage would be on a now reduced 8-acre grow instead of the original 20 whatever acres that was included. But I don't know exactly where we would add that. I can't really see it on the screen, but just to add something, you know, just within it, because I know there's a paragraph addressing the concerns about water and water quality and pesticides and everything like that. So, I mean, just including something within that, you know, about also the, you know, impacts that it would have on climate change. And I know there's been also discussion of, you know, it's closest to the coastal zone with rising sea levels. How would that be impacted? And thinking about, you know, the project in terms of that as well. And that, yeah, and just looking at, you know, accounting for climate change basically on impacts to groundwater, water supply, and then also loss of open space and, you know, just creating more greenhouse gases as well, I think would be something important to include, which I think it's partially mentioned, but maybe not completely. So, but again, I don't have any specific language to add, but that is my comment.
Let's see, I'll just go down through the roll call. Councilmember Goldstein, anything, any other comments or recommended language?
I don't think I have any specific recommendations. I fully agree that I think we just should address environmental impacts really clearly. I would just ask that as a final edit, you know, as we go through, or Karen, as you go through for a final round of editing, just to make sure that the language is really strong, that we're not, I don't think it is, but that we're not being wishy-washy in any way, because I think it's, from all what I'm hearing from all of my fellow council members and the public, that we all feel like there's some pretty serious concerns around this project. So just to stay strong in what we're trying to say.
Thank you. Councilmember Atkins Salazar.
I guess I have more of a question. So I did agree with some of the additions that were brought up, like the TSC recommendations for biking and pedestrians, and then the possibility of part of the Measure S funds coming to data, and also the concerns of the other grows in the area. But my question is, should all of that be going into this letter right now? I mean, I feel like the recommendations by the Transportation and Safety Committee, us getting, you know, possible money, that would be more appropriate to handle if this is going through, and then as we work our way through that process. So I guess that's only what I just want to be, I don't want to muddy up waters with too much. So that's the question for those of you on the council that are more experienced. Should we just stick to really the focus on the environment and what our actual concerns are, whether it should or shouldn't happen? And then if it is going to happen, will there be a time for us to come back with, okay, it's happening, so now this is what we want or would like to see? So that's a question.
David, feel free to jump in if you have better advice, but you know, in terms of a process step, this project is before the Planning Commission. If the Planning Commission does approve it, there would be an option for the neighborhood to appeal that decision to the Board of Supervisors. If the Planning Commission denies that, the applicant, by that same process, can appeal that to the Board of Supervisors. I mean, I suppose there is an option in there where if somebody doesn't appeal it, and whatever the planning commission's decision then remains final. You know, but, you know, given the amount of interest and not asking anyone on the call to speak to this tonight, you know, I think that we are all have made the assumption that there is a likelihood that this will have another process step at the Board of Supervisors level. But if you think that I've misspoken, David, correct me quick.
No, I think that's exactly right. And the only thing that I would add to this is that the Planning Commission doesn't have the authority or the ability to distribute tax monies. And so if the city is concerned about, you know, the distribution of those tax funds that are generated on the property, that would have to follow another process. But the city could identify areas where they believe that there are mitigations necessary or conditions of approval necessary to appropriately offset impacts to infrastructure, even if they're not in fact environmental impacts. And where I'm going with this is the concept that, you know, potentially the project, while currently it's mitigated to provide some funds to assist with the level of service improvements the city identified in its area-wide traffic study. To my knowledge, the conditions haven't been placed on the project to pay for ongoing maintenance of Foster Avenue, which is likely the most impacted road. And so I think that would be an appropriate ask in this, is that if the project is approved, that it be conditioned with you know, ongoing maintenance liabilities for Foster Avenue and other affected roads, something to that effect.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar, was there anything else?
No, that answers it. So then I think that we should make sure that we include, if it does, you know, pass, that there are some maintenance liabilities for the county, as well as including some of the recommendations from the Traffic and Safety Committee.
And I guess I'd just say, from a process standpoint, we can work this all through tonight, or if you wanted just to have a subcommittee to have the mayor and one other person finalize a letter, especially if you are really trying to get it before the Planning Commission tomorrow, we could do that. You know, you could authorize, you know, Sophia and one other person to finalize a letter with me tomorrow and have it ready if you don't want to go through and give me exact language tonight. Either way.
I'll see. Vice Mayor Watson.
I'm happy with everything so far and all the comments. I don't have anything else to add. And I'm, you know, regarding what City Manager Deemer just said, I'm happy either way. If we want to do a subcommittee, I'd be happy to volunteer to be on it.
Okay. I did want to just bring up proposed language. Not that I want to totally, you know, do the wordsmithing here if we're going to do a subcommittee, but I'm bringing it up just because I think it's position based. So that's why I'm bringing it up. So, you know, at line 75, after, you know, the ability of the project to mitigate neighborhood impacts, adding a line, something to the effect of, additionally, please consider the cumulative impacts of potential and future large-scale projects in this region. And then for that next sentence on line 75, where it says, please closely evaluate the process and all the studies that indicate, replacing that part with an environmental impact report would ensure that all impacts have been identified, analyzed, and addressed fully through mitigation. So just more explicitly saying that an environmental impact report would speak to these concerns that are being raised, and there would be a process. So I don't know what folks think about that, but that's just one recommendation.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because that really has been like a main point of what a lot of our constituents have been asking for, is that a full environmental impact report should be done. So I think that we, should get that message across. Yes, it's veiled in all of the things that we're asking for, but stating that clearly, I think is essential. Yeah.
Agreed. I think that's a perfect way to word it. Yeah, I fully support that.
I agree, and I'm also fine with having mayor and vice mayor and city manager finalize it tomorrow. I'm happy with that as well.
Yeah, I also agree with the proposed changes.
One question I do have in us doing a subcommittee, totally fine with whatever the council decides. A question would be about reading it into the record. I know that's been a request that someone from our council read it into the record tomorrow evening. Unfortunately, I have a family obligation that I would not be able to personally read it into the record. So I don't know if there is someone on this council that would be willing to do that, or if we feel, I know that there's going to be a lot of public comment that night, and we still can put something that's into the written record. But I just wanted to propose that if this council wants to consider having someone formally read it into the record.
What time is the planning commission meeting at? I do have our CEA tomorrow though, so I don't know if I could be able to make it, but does anybody know what time that's at?
We will find out momentarily.
I guess.
So I think it's at 6, but I'm not sure.
Yes, it is at 6 o'clock. Their notice is at 6 o'clock.
And I guess from a logistical perspective, I'm assuming they have time limits as well with public comment. So this, I guess, just for maybe the public's recognition that if we were to have a representative read this into the record, it would not be the full letter read into the record. It would be a portion or however far, or excerpts from it. Maybe it's some intro and then the conclusion, but I just want to be realistic that that entire letter would not be able to be read in one piece into the record. Unless there's a different perspective on that from staff, but that would be my understanding for public comment.
Yeah, and we could check on their timelines. They don't list it on the agenda itself, but I would imagine they do, given the amount of comment they're receiving on this.
Is this something where we'd like to authorize a council member to do it, like Councilmember Schaefer, if you're interested, but if you can't make it, like understandable, given that it wouldn't be able to be the full letter anyways, it's something the planning commission would receive.
And I think, I know reading into the record, it's important, and it sounds, people hear it, but also I think, receiving a public comment, receiving a letter from the Arcata City Council, the planning commissioners are going to read it, and, it's going to be out there and it's going to be publicly available. And, hopefully everybody that's listening tonight and has been part of this meeting is seeing where we are standing. And I think that is the most important part of it. So.
I agree. Yeah, I think that if somebody wants to read it into the record tomorrow, I also have an obligation tomorrow night. So I don't want to say, let's do it, and then not be the one to volunteer. And so, yeah, if somebody wants to do it, then I'm full in support of it. But I also agree that I think that a letter coming from us will have a lot of weight, hopefully. And I do think that it will have eyes on it before the meeting.
Okay, well, at this point, I'll entertain a motion.
So I guess if we're going to go ahead with the subcommittee idea, it sounds like.
You can put that out on the floor.
Okay.
Your motion.
So unless there's any objections to that, I'll make a motion to create a subcommittee with myself and Mayor Pereira to approve the final version of the letter before it goes to the Planning Commission.
Oh, a second, sorry.
Sorry.
Twice in a row. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'll call the vote by roll call. Councilmember Schaefer.
Aye.
Councilmember Goldstein.
Aye.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Watson.
Aye.
I'll vote aye as well. Motion passes. Thank you, everyone.
And Mayor, if you could just send me what you were reading from earlier today, that'd be helpful on the few changes to those items. I got most of it, but not all of it.
I'll convert it from the chicken scratch.
Or just snap a picture of the chicken scratch. That's fine.
I'll type it. The letter will get done faster if I type it. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, next under new business, item B, receive a presentation by Humboldt State University's Kinesiology and Recreation Administration directed study program regarding the installation of interpretive signage for the Arcata wayfinding project, provide comments and questions of the proposed pilot project, and provide approval of the project based on the suggested feedback provided by council. So I will welcome our HSU presenters and any city staff that may be participating.
Yes, hello. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm Heather Schmidt, for those of you who don't know me, Recreation Supervisor with the city. And tonight I just wanted to help introduce the HSU students who've been working on this project and help give you a little overview of what they're working on. This is a grant-funded project, a grant that they've already received and been working on throughout the spring semester here. And this project would allow them to purchase and install wayfinding and walkability signs on some different identified paths throughout Arcata. They'll speak to you in detail about, what those paths are and what the signage is, as well as their goals for this project. I do want to let you know that they made a presentation yesterday afternoon to the TSC, and that was received with a lot of support and enthusiasm. And yeah, tonight we're hoping that the council will see and hear their presentation, provide them with your feedback, and ultimately, make a motion to allow them to move forward with installation. So without further ado, I'm going to let Mandy, I did see her. Oh, there she is. I'll let Mandy take over and she'll introduce you to their project.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me tonight. My name is Mandy and I'm a senior at HSU. I'm a student assistant for the Wayfinding project. I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can see what we have. Can you all see?
Yep.
Okay, great. First, before I start presenting, I just want to take a moment to pay tribute to the WIOT people and acknowledge that the project that we're proposing is a
Mandy, I think we lost your audio.
in Arcata. We're going to create a series of guided trails with signage that will connect Humboldt State University to Arcata and Arcata to Humboldt State. We've been out in the community and we've been considering things like accessibility, safety, resting areas, and places of interest. Just to give you a little more information about the project, it's being funded by a grant. The signs will be paid for by the grant, and it's coming from an organization called Walk Your City. And it's to increase the walkability of any given area, which is one of the goals that we have for the project. Ideally, the timeline is we're going to start installing them around the beginning of May and hopefully have it completed by early August. The goal is to also have it included with the orientation package for new students. And just to give you an idea who's been working on the project, we have 2 professors. It's a collaboration of better idea of what it'll look like. They're made of chloroplast. They're pretty easy to install. They're semi-permanent. This is what we're going to be putting up just to give you an idea. So we have a couple of proposed trails. We have the Northtown Trail, which is going to start over on Alliance and 14th, and it'll go to HS.
Mayor, is she breaking out for you too, or just me?
Yeah, Mandy, we're having trouble hearing you. You're cutting out for some stretches of time. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Were you asking me something?
Your audio was cutting out a bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. My internet can be a little unstable. If it keeps doing that, I'll probably have to turn my camera off. But I'll just repeat. This is just a couple of our proposed trails. Just to see, you can read them on here. I'll go over them further in detail later on. It's just to give you an idea of what we're planning. And so I'll go ahead and show you on the map what we've got proposed so far. So our Northtown Trail is here in the teal, as you can see. It's going to go around Shea Park, come up around where the remnants of St. Mary's is near the high school, and then it'll wrap around through Northtown and come back over through the overpass. Then we're going to have some trails on campus that you'll see here in yellow and green. They're going to highlight different things on campus like art, access to the forests, the redwood groves, things like that. And then it'll connect over here to our red trail, which is the Heart to Heart Trail, which connects the Humboldt State to the plaza. And the plaza over here in purple, you'll see it's called our Around Town Trail. And so it connects to the Creamery District. And then the Creamery District over here is in this kind of darker green. And we have a link over here that goes to the, I think you all have probably seen the little art area that they have hanging on the fences kind of over near the pub. Utilizing different resources that already exist, like the Victorian tour guides, the botany trails, the art walks, things like that we've been taking into consideration. And so that is pretty much the overview of our project. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Great, thank you, Mandy. I'm now going to ask for questions from the council, starting with Vice Mayor Watson.
I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Atkins Salazar.
I don't have any questions, but I am excited about the project. I know that it's been talked about in some of the Main Street meetings that I've been in, so it definitely coincides with the way we're moving or looking to move forward in our community. So I'm looking forward to see it implemented.
Great. Councilmember Schaefer.
No questions, but again, thank you for your presentation, and I'm excited about this. I mean, it really does meet our goals of, trying to connect the HSU community with Arcata and getting students, more involved and getting to know their town a little better. So thank you so much, and this is great. I'm excited. I'll do some of the trails too. So,
Councilmember Goldstein.
No questions, but thank you so much for all your hard work on the project and for the presentation. Yeah, I'm also really excited about this. I think it'll be a great addition to our town, and I'm excited to, also walk all the trails. I think it'll be really fun. So thank you.
No questions on my end, Mandy. Just thank you to you and your team, and thank you to our city staff for partnering to help bring this to us. I think this is a great asset to our community. And I just wanted to say, I really like the name Heart to Heart for that trail. I just thought that was a really great way to say heart of campus to the heart of our community and making that connection. So, you know, we're all about love here in Arcata, but I just thought it was a clever name. I just wanted to recognize it. Whoever came up with that, kudos. Let's see, do we have any members of the public waiting to comment on this item?
Taking a moment to check for public comment on this item. No public comment.
Okay. Is there anything that we need to make a motion on at this point in terms of like approval of this?
I heard pretty loud consensus, so you're welcome to make a motion, but I think the project can move forward on consensus if you would like as well tonight.
Okay. So it's really the pleasure of the council if you want to make a motion to officially support it or not. Okay. Well, you received the consensus and the support of the council. Thank you again for all your work on this. We're really excited to see the rollout.
And I couldn't hear you.
We're just expressing our support for the project. Really grateful for all your work. Thank you.
I appreciate it. I do have a question for you before we move on. I was curious, what is it we need to do in order to apply for permits to install the signs?
Mandy, I can work with you on that, follow up with you guys tomorrow to get you moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Really appreciate it too. Okay, next. Item C for new business. Provide direction to staff on the city's formula restaurant ordinance. May I have a staff report from Community Development Director Loya?
Yeah, good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. The item before you tonight is sort of a prelude to a zoning interpretation and a little bit of a direction to staff. Typically, the zoning administrator, when there's a question about how to interpret the code, puts that down on paper as a zoning interpretation, and then that becomes, in effect, part of the code, the way that we interpret and implement the code. This particular piece of code around formula restaurants, or I may say fast food, was adopted a couple of decades ago, and the interpretation is at somewhat of a disconnect with the original intent as it was identified. And so because there are policy implications as well as land use implications, I wanted to make sure that I brought that before the council and sought direction as to how to address this disconnect. Okay, so the outcome will be either code interpretation, zoning amendment, or both. Okay, so the formula restaurant ordinance, in a nutshell, around 20 years ago, the council directed the Committee on Democracy and Corporations to evaluate an ordinance and bring forward recommendations to prevent fast food restaurants from establishing on the plaza. That was the original intent. And as I understand it, Mayor Prayer was on the CDC at the time. So if I get any of these, oh, it's not true. Okay.
My husband was. I was on it like 10 years ago. Cannot take credit.
Okay. Okay. Good. So you won't be able to correct me then.
Well, bring him in here. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. Well, I stand corrected on that one factoid anyway. But if anybody has other information, I mean, I'm basing this all on historical records. If anybody else has information to bring forward, please do. But this is my understanding of how this transpired. It's about 20 years ago. The council asked the committee to come up with some ordinance language that would prevent establishment of fast food restaurants on the plaza. Through the research they did, they found several ordinances that would limit fast food or restaurants in general throughout the city. They found some that eliminated them entirely, and some that would prevent them in certain areas, and came forward ultimately with a recommendation to limit the number of fast food restaurants to 9. Now, this was in part based on the existing numbers. If you look at the attachment B, that was one of the original, which is on packet page 81, that was one of the original documentations of the restaurants that were considered at the time to be part of the ordinance. But ultimately, the ordinance resulted in a definition of restaurant, definition of fast food restaurant, limitation of 9 specifying the areas, Valley West, the James Road area, where these restaurants could be, and then adopted some new zoning regulation that included language about where these restaurants could be established. In effect, it said all of the existing are in place, but if you want to add a new restaurant, it has to replace an existing. That was adopted into the city's land use and development guide, the zoning ordinance that predates the one that we're currently operating on. Subsequent to that, the land use code was adopted, and it carried forward this fast food restaurant ordinance, but it made certain changes to it. And so really it's the translation. There are 2 disconnects that happen here. There was the translation between the CDC's and maybe the planning commission's and maybe the city council's intent as to which restaurants qualified as fast food restaurants and what was actually implemented in the code, the definitions and the ordinances that were adopted, created one of the first disconnects. And then the second disconnect was created when we adopted the land use code and changed the regulation and adopted new definitions and the ways that they're regulated. So I'm going to walk through each of these disconnects one at a time. They both have kind of slightly different resolutions or could have slightly different resolutions. And it's largely because of the nature of the disconnect. So the first disconnect, the original Committee on Democracy and Corporations deliberations included Chester's Chicken as one of the formula restaurants. The staff report, as I indicated in attachment B here to the Planning Commission, included that list, clearly identifies Chester's Chicken as a formula restaurant. But then the definition that was adopted into the actual ordinance 1333, which is attachment A to your staff report beginning on page 74, actually excludes Chester's Chicken by definition from the concept of a restaurant. On packet page 70, it shows the original land use and development guide definition. Any retail establishment whose principal business is the sale of meals, including food and beverage, which is eaten on or off the premises. So the important information there is whose principal business. Chester's Chicken, when it was established at the time and it's currently operating in this way today, doesn't really distinguish between the Chevron station and the quote-unquote restaurant. There's absolutely no question that the parent company that franchises Chester's Chickens considers themselves a restaurant. I called and spoke to the general manager of the Chevron the other day. She feels like it's a restaurant. I think most people think that, if you can go and get food from a place that's cooked and prepared for you, that qualifies as a restaurant. But a strict interpretation, and not an overly strict interpretation, but just a plain read, would disqualify Chester's Chicken as a formula restaurant, as a restaurant in general. The resolution to this could be a code amendment. So I can think of ways to bring in Chester's Chicken if we wanted to, as a zoning amendment that would then pick out specific qualities around Chester's Chicken that are distinct to this particular business type, but that don't draw in other businesses unintentionally. I'd mentioned in the staff report, for example, the signature cafe that Safeway has in many of its locations. We wouldn't want to unintentionally interpret Safeway as a formula restaurant because it has a signature cafe. And so I can imagine some careful crafting of zoning to try and draw in Chester's Chicken as a restaurant. There are some other modifications that we can get into too. But I want the council to know that just because I'm bringing forward this interpretation that these don't qualify as restaurants now, it doesn't mean that we can't change that if that's the policy direction. The second disconnect really came when we switched codes, when we changed our ordinance from the LUDGI or the Land Use and Development Guide to the now Land Use Code and adopted new definitions of restaurant, new definition of formula restaurant, And the salient point in this is on packet page 71. A restaurant is a retail business selling ready-to-eat food. This presents a problem for Papa Murphy's because while you can go up to Papa Murphy's and buy a, I mean, I guess if you wanted to, you could eat the cookie dough right out of the container, but you can buy a salad or a drink. You can take that into your car and you can eat it. So it's ready-to-eat food. But the way that we interpret things in the land use arena is like, what is their principal business type? And they principally prepare food that's not ready to eat. But there's no question that Papa Murphy's, if you look at, where do they fall in the categories for sales tax? They fall as a restaurant. How do they market themselves? It's clearly a restaurant. It's a standalone unit of business that provides food to the public at a retail, in retail delivery. And so Papa Murphy's is a little bit more nuanced. I can see coming to an interpretation that does define Papa Murphy's as a restaurant under the current code, but it would take some interpretation. It's not just a plain read of our existing formula restaurant or of our restaurant definitions. The other change that sort of complicated the interpretation for Chester's Chicken in the land use code, and this is just a minor wrinkle because if it's not a restaurant by definition, then it doesn't matter about the other conflicts that there may be in the code. But I did want to point out that in the original land use and development guide regulation, it acknowledged, it recognized, I think specifically because the intent was to capture businesses that are restaurants within other businesses. There was language that included restaurants that are part of another business. That was lost in land use code, and so it makes it harder to make an interpretation that Chester's Chicken was intended to be a restaurant, and I can identify features that sort of qualify it as a restaurant, and even though it's located inside a business, currently it would be defined as an accessory use, not as an independent use, and so it's even farther removed as a restaurant if that's the direction we want to go. And so I've listed under the policy implications, starting on page 72, some questions that the council can work through to try and provide the direction that we need in order to either initiate a code interpretation that defines both Papa Murphy's and Chester's as not restaurants, and therefore opening two potential slots for these formula restaurants. The code interpretation, quite frankly, depending on council's policy direction, could result in Chester's Chicken is not a formula restaurant, but if we want it to be, then we can do a zoning amendment. But Papa Murphy's is, and so we're going to regulate that one as a restaurant, and then there's no available formula restaurant in the Uniontown because there's West Side Pizza and Papa Murphy's. And then additionally, we can initiate a code amendment that would capture both of these. And if we do go down the road of doing a code amendment, one thing I'd like the council to consider is eliminating the geographical restrictions. The original intent was to prevent formula restaurants on the plaza. And I think I would expand that to the central business district. And if we get to that point, I can work you through where all the boundaries of these different districts are, but sort of the core downtown area. I can see excluding formula restaurants from that area, but then allowing the areas that are commercial that would otherwise allow for restaurants, let those compete in the market for the total 9 that are available in the city. That allows businesses to move around, doesn't restrict them to certain areas. One of the businesses that was vacated was the Denny's on Janes Road, and I think that happened like 20 years ago. And so that location is just basically locked up. It's not available. And so sort of balancing the market conditions that would allow for some participation of formula restaurants, not allow them to dominate, but to allow them to move around and have that freedom of choice, let the market decide. That's another thing that I'd like the council to provide us input on if you want a zoning amendment. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. And I know that the public is interested in this. The original motivation for this code interpretation was because there are two businesses that are currently interested, one in opening a new formula restaurant and one that's interested in moving. Subway wanted to move from Northtown to Uniontown. And so there's that interest. And I know that we received some blue folder items for public comment, and there may be public comment as well tonight.
Thank you. Let's start with questions from the council, starting with Councilmember Atkins Salazar.
I don't have questions. I have thoughts for later, but no questions.
Okay, Councilmember Goldstein.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat. No questions right now. Just taking it all in and thinking.
Oh, Councilmember Schaefer.
You cut off. Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah. I'm looking at this list that is in page 81 of the packet that has that total 9. And so of this, I mean, I see, oh wait, maybe, okay, I guess these are all being included, but so this list has changed, I guess, in some ways. And so we're currently, though, still sitting at that number, right? Because I know there's a Subway in Valley West that no longer exists, right? Papa John's is gone, but I guess that replaced the Papa John's. I'm just trying to like get this updated list in my head. And then the Denny's does not exist anymore.
Yeah, so there are currently 7 because the Subway in Northtown closed. The Denny's closed.
The Subway in Valley West is still open.
Oh, it is. Okay.
And that's what replaced the Papa John's on the list that you're looking at.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. And so then we're just looking at, I mean, the idea that, you know, yeah, if we're going to keep continuing on with these zones, and then as in addition to the definition of what, you know, a formula restaurant would be, correct?
Yeah, those are the two questions.
Because yeah, so if these zones cease to exist, then Subway could easily transition from Northtown to Uniontown and not have, you know, any constraints on them. Okay, well, that's my only question. And I'll hold there for now. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Vice Mayor Watson, any questions?
No questions, thanks.
I don't have any questions either. Just one comment I want to make before public comment that I think is just important to give context to. I know it's in the staff report, but I just wanted to reiterate that the legislative intent behind this ordinance is broader, I think, than, you know, just fast food. I know that that's like the list of restaurants, but I just wanted to reiterate that the legislative intent, you know, was to maintain character, protect historical character, promote sustainable economic development, among other public benefits. And so I just want to, you know, not make this personal to fast food in Arcata. I think for the purposes of any public comment and for I think for this council as well, just to that reminder of the net benefits of an ordinance like this that we've seen in Arcata. I remember years ago, taking my father around the plaza, and he was like, "Gosh, you have so many great, you know, local businesses and local restaurants." And I can't remember how it came up, but it's like, yeah, that wasn't by accident, right? By design, in sense of our planning as a community, and, you know, an ordinance like this factored in to that as well. So I just wanted to give a little bit of that context as well before we open up to public comment and before we discuss as a council. So do we have any public comment on this item?
We do. Colin is our first speaker. If you want to go ahead, Colin, you'll have 2 minutes, please.
Thank you. This is Colin Fisk, and I am just speaking on this item on my own behalf as a resident of Arcata, not on behalf of any organization or committee. But yeah, I just wanted to say that I think at least prior to COVID, one of the strongest trends in grocery and convenience retail generally is towards prepared and partially prepared food. And I suspect that trend will continue, and we'll continue to see, more and more establishments in sort of this gray area if those loopholes aren't closed. And I think that in order to maintain the legislative intent of the ordinance, I would encourage you to to amend the code to clearly close those loopholes and keep the ordinance effective. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, I apologize if I say your name wrong. Is it Ali or Ollie?
Ali,
Amira?
yes.
Oh, yes, please go ahead.
Yes, good evening, council members. This is Ali Ramatullah. I'm the property manager for the Uniontown Shopping Center. I've been managing the shopping center since 1983. And I do want to share with you the fact that the market, especially after COVID, has actually impacted many retailers. We have last year lost AT&T, Advanced Cellular, and now Rico's Tacos. Even before COVID, I'm sure you're all familiar with shopping center. We've had the laundromat that's been vacant for over 15 years, and then Jeanette Creations, a nail salon, about 4 or 5 years ago. So my perspective to this whole thing is, I don't think anyone benefits by looking at a shopping center that has so many vacancies, especially when Subway is just moving within the city. They're not coming from outside. They're just going from one location to another. So I do want to share that part of it so that you're kind of turning the tables and looking at it from my end as well. Wanting to have a vibrant shopping center, wanting to serve the community. I honestly think Subway would be super beneficial for the university, being within close proximity. So we've been good citizens. I don't think you've had any problems with us. Again, we've been almost like 30 years now managing it. So I would like you to either take out that formula.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, your 2 minutes is up. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Victor. Victor, can you go ahead, please?
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please. You have 2 minutes.
Victor Chang, I'm calling with the Subway restaurant. And, we've been in Arcata since 1989. And so we've been a long-term member of the community. I do want to point out to the council that I feel there is a difference between a franchise that is operated by the corporate entity and one like Subway, which is, a small business owner like we are. I think there's a difference, a distinct difference in that, the brand, the reason we selected the brand is because it lends itself and gives us, purchasing power. It helps us with our advertising, and it allows us to serve the community as opposed to having to think about all the ins and outs of running a restaurant day to day. Also, the fact that the ordinance was passed almost 2 decades ago, a lot has changed since that time in terms of, nowadays with, like, if I travel and I am in a community, I'm not going to go to Subway myself. I'm going to look up on Yelp and look for the nice local restaurant and get a flavor of a local community, right? So I think we really do just end up serving locals that might want, you know, a chain restaurant sandwich on a given day, and then, you know, on the other days they're free to go and select any of the neighborhood delis. I think that's something to be considered. And then also square footage and size is something that I found lacking from the ordinance. You know, somebody could open up a 5,000 square foot restaurant, or, you know, like a Denny's compared to Subway.
Victor, thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. One last check for any further public comment on this item, please. Okay, no further comment, public comment, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the public comment. Bringing it back to the council, let's just see what other comments come up. So Councilmember Atkins Salazar.
Okay, so just some of my thoughts on the things that we're looking at. I mean, overall, I appreciate the limitations that we have. It does show up in our town, you know, the way that we've designed it, and I absolutely appreciate that. I do think, as far as the zoning goes, I'd be in favor of doing what David suggested, of creating that central business district, plaza base, that where we don't want anything, and then having whatever if 9 is our number, then the 9 can be wherever they are in the community. So, like, for example, that Subway could change locations. So I do think we should update it in that way. The more complicated one is the specific example of Chester's Chicken. I guess, I think if we're looking at this with the strict intention of the ordinances, then I believe that is what they wanted it to be. They wanted Chester's to count in that. I think that we can agree on that. I look at that possibly a little bit differently, just in the time that we're in. My leanings would be, if something such as that, it's not the principal purpose, I would be open for not having that count. That's my thought on that. And not sure how I feel about Papa Murphy's. I mean, I think it's definitely a formula business, so that it probably should count in the cap, but I don't think we're overrun by any means with fast food restaurants or formula restaurants.
Great, thank you. Any comments or thoughts from Councilmember Goldstein?
Yeah, I agree. I think that it'd be fine to have the central zone on the plaza and the surrounding areas where we don't want formula restaurants. And then I personally don't see an issue with Subway just moving across town. It just doesn't seem like a big deal to me. You know, we live in a very small town, so realistically, they're only moving like a few blocks from where they currently are. It's not like, you know, they're invading a whole new neighborhood or anything. Like, it just doesn't seem like a big deal. And if that's what's right for their business, like, I'm fine with that. And I mean, and I agree with the manager of the Union Town Shopping Center too, that we don't really want like just an empty shopping center either. So I'm totally fine with that. I think that the one, I guess, caveat or concern that I'm feeling a little bit around saying almost like it's a free-for-all, like we're not going to have any sort of zones outside of the like one area. And I think it kind of came up when you, Mayor, were talking about the original intent of this ordinance, was when I started thinking about the Valley West area, that is probably the place that we have the most fast food and formula restaurants. And we also in our goals have set that we are really working to bring equity to that area. And I think that, to me, that feels like I want to safeguard some spaces in that area to make sure that they also have access to local restaurants and healthier choices for takeout. Because I think we have a lot of affordable local versions of restaurants in other parts of Arcata, but we have a lot of fast food up in Valley West. So that might just be like one caveat that I'd like to look at, is maybe we could keep Valley West as a specific zone as well, with a specific number and cap. I think that would speak more truly to the original intent as well, in my opinion. And then, because this has not been helpful at all to you, David, for the 2 questions you asked about, sorry. I know you were specifically wanting guidance around Chester's and Papa Murphy's, and I would say that I'm feeling really torn. I'm feeling kind of like, you know, the like debate of like, is a hot dog a sandwich? Like, I feel kind of like that right now. Like, you could go either way, right? And yeah, I mean, I think that what kind of sold me on Papa Murphy's, and maybe this is a question I should have asked earlier, I could ask now, is you had said, Director Loya, that Papa Murphy's pays taxes as a restaurant. Do we know how Chester's pays taxes, or is it just grouped under Chevron? Because I think that would help me at least. If they're classifying themselves that way, then to me, that's what they are.
Yeah. First, I just want to state in the strongest of all possible terms that hot dog is a sandwich.
I don't know, man. I don't know.
Chester's does not pay its taxes separately. And in fact, if only to complicate matters, when I was speaking with the general manager the other day, she had identified that one of the things that she wants to really emphasize Chester's. Right now, the only way that you know there's a Chester's in there is either by, it's word of mouth, you already know it, or they have a very small sign on the side of their building. It's not like a co-branded, they don't have, big, it's not a big splash really. But people love, for some reason, Chester's fried chicken. And it's got a line out the door, and they oftentimes sell out a product. And so, she's actually moving towards trying to segregate that use within her existing business. She wants to, right now they don't have separate uniforms. She wants to get them with separate uniforms. She wants to split the till up so that they can have separate reporting. So for all of its history, it's been completely blended and merged. Even if they had all of that, separate till, separate advertising, or even co-branding, separate uniforms, from our land use code perspective, it would still be considered an accessory use, not the primary use. And so, the intent tonight really isn't to, resolve on all these issues. I mean, I think you've raised some important, social justice questions about, we have this concentration in one area that, houses also a concentration of low income people. And we need to sort through all of that in a lot more detail. Does necessarily, spreading the businesses out then draw in other businesses that are not formula, and all of those questions need to be sorted out from a policy perspective. But the real question for tonight, I think, is, should we drive in the direction of that original intent? There may be some updates and modifications that we need to do, or should we just respect the regulation as it's in place here, now, and today? If I went with the most plain read of the codes, my conclusion would be Chester's Chicken is not a restaurant, and therefore it's not a formula restaurant. Papa Murphy's is not a restaurant, so therefore it's not a formula restaurant. That would open up one in the Uniontown and one in the Valley West. I still think it's worth, pursuing some additional, research on this. It's a 20-year-old code. We should probably look to update it. I know there are several HSU students who, even though to us it's like, our niche-y little, local restaurants are something that we really embrace. A lot of students come from out of the area, and they're looking for things that are familiar to them. They don't feel welcome because they don't see the things that are familiar to them. And so there's a lot of different sides to all of these different issues that I think, it's worth, digging into in more depth and trying to update that code. And so I think there's a lot of different directions that we could go with it. Long answer to a very simple question. But I think I hope I've answered it. Please let me know if I haven't.
No, that was great. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I agree with what you're saying. I do think that it's 20 years old. So looking at it again makes sense to me. I think that was all I had. I feel like I had something else I was going to say, but I think that was all I had. So thank you.
We can always come back to you if something else comes up. Let's see, Councilmember Schaefer.
Yeah. So just a question to clarify. So we're looking at this total number of 9, and that is a cap that we have reached. Yes. Okay. But if we got rid of the zoning issue, then it wouldn't necessarily, because then it looks like even if we said that Chester's and Papa Murphy's were both, then we'd still only be at 8, correct? If my numbering in here is right. So then an additional proposed place in Valley West could theoretically exist if we got rid of this zoning situation.
Yes. So technically, because Subway in Northtown is already closed, we're actually in fact down to 7 right now. So
yeah, that is my brain. If Subway, would be in Uniontown. Which
So if the geography were eliminated and the central business district were excluded, that would leave open 2. And so both the 2 businesses that motivated this question would be very happy. Ali would be very happy, and we could move on with our day. Obviously, that would take some time to implement. We'd have to develop the ordinance, go through. I wouldn't want to promise this as a quick fix, because I think, as Councilmember Goldstein pointed out, there may be additional items that we want to consider as we move forward. And so, take the time to do the analysis. Certainly, as an interim step, if the council wanted to move in that direction, a way to kind of have it both ways would be to interpret the code strictly, interpret the definition strictly, and then start working on a code amendment that would, update the definitions, update the geographies, and that sort of thing. Because by doing the strict interpretation, again, everyone's happy that brought this question forward. I mean, I'm not going to pretend everyone's happy, but certainly the Subway would be resolved, and the new business owner in Valley West would be resolved. It wouldn't allow for any additional unless something occurred over on James Road. And then in the interim, we could develop this new ordinance that would continue to adopt the restriction, set a new cap if we wanted, and identify the appropriate geographies. So that is an alternative for the council moving forward.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. And then I guess just to kind of answer your questions of where I'm sitting, but I mean, I do agree in some sense about the sentiment that, there are a lot of these types of formula restaurants in Valley West. They are also incredibly popular, and they also, I mean, the prospect of a new business, whether it's formula or not, in that community, providing jobs, providing something exciting and new, is also always good, and brings people maybe even from other communities into there to, I don't know what the proposed Valley West thing is, but to get their fix, whatever it might be of, I'm not gonna even speculate, but whatever it might be, to bring people into that community who, might shop there, but also might stop to get their groceries at Ray's and go get some gas at the local gas station and maybe wash their car and, make a day of it, whatever it might be. And so, that is the quick fix, is to say, yes, Chester's is a restaurant. They want to be. Yes, Papa Murphy's is a restaurant. They have been. We count those. We get rid of these zones. And then Subway could be there, and then this new place could open, and then it's closed. There are no more available spaces at that point. And so I guess that's the will of the council. If we really want to dig deeper and reanalyze this ordinance and kind of create parameters, or if we just kind of want to, keep the landscape as it is currently. Which I don't actually feel super, I don't know. I don't feel super swayed either way currently. but I mean, for the sense of, you know, hopefully getting some more things in the Uniontown Shopping Center, kind of revitalizing, you know, some of these areas. There's now vacancy up in Northtown. I know there's already another new restaurant going up in that same little center up there. So new space is exciting. Other things could be going up there. So I guess I really didn't answer any of your questions. But yes, I think Chester's Fried Chicken is a restaurant, especially with what you were saying, how they want to be separate and want to kind of formulate that more. So we would have to come and revisit that anyway if they want to kind of more separate. And yes, I think Papa Murphy's is also a restaurant, especially if they pay their taxes as a restaurant. But I do support kind of what Stacy, or what, both Stacy and Emily said about kind of at least either reworking these zones or kind of just designated that one, you know, kind of downtown business district, that plaza, and, you know, kind of maybe over to the Creamery area, that area of Arcata. And then, you know, it's not opening the floodgates because we have a cap at this 9, you know, it's not like, okay, and then everybody else, you can open McDonald's right up by Arcata High. No, that's, you know, not what's going to happen. So I do think re-looking at these zones and maybe getting rid of these zones or defining just one downtown zone would be helpful. So yeah, sorry, I just talked a lot, but thank you. Yeah, that's what I got.
It's good. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Vice Mayor Watson.
Yeah, I'm fine with counting Chester's and Papa Murphy's as restaurants and just doing this idea of just having one central zone.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. Chester's Chicken, Papa Murphy's, counting them as formula restaurants, I think does make sense. And I think also just very from the public perspective, the ownership piece, or how much of the sales tax, like at a certain point, it's formula restaurant for all of these other reasons, the brand, the product, the things that make it a formula restaurant don't really have anything to do with like our sales tax. Like, not like the consumer's like, well, how are they taxed? And that to me would have me understand, like McDonald's, you know, formula restaurant, Ruth Chris Steakhouse, Texas Roadhouse Steakhouse. Those are formula restaurants. I don't know if we're getting a Texas Roadhouse, but I used to love those butter rolls. I'm vegan now, so I can't eat there. But I do, for the zoning piece, I do agree that we don't need to have, you know, zones across the city. However, Valley West is the second. I mean, when we think about the commercial centers of our community, it is the downtown of Arcata, our central business district, and then Valley West. And so I think doing zones across the city doesn't make a ton of sense when you think about the commercial centers in, you know, Westwood neighborhood versus Valley West. It's like Valley West is a clear commercial center, a place where commerce occurs. And I think it would be really important to maintain that as a zone of some kind, just so that we're being mindful. If we see it's important to maintain certain parameters for the downtown around Arcata, you know, Arcata Plaza, then I think Valley West deserves that same attention and consideration. So I appreciate that being brought up. Director Loya, what else do you need from us? We answered many questions.
We answered many questions. And so I guess at the end of the day, the Chester's Chicken is not defined currently as a restaurant. But I heard majority of the council members say they wish to see it defined as a restaurant. That's going to require an ordinance update. If the council wishes to prohibit another formula restaurant establishing in the Valley West before the new ordinance is adopted, we would probably need to pursue some sort of a moratorium. The other way to handle it, of course, is to have the code interpretation that it's, if you're willing to accept another formula restaurant in that zone, accept the code interpretation that Chester's is not a formula and don't implement a moratorium. For the Papa Murphy's, again, I heard a majority of council members say that they.
Hold on, can we just follow your line of thinking there a little bit? So what you're saying is that there would be one additional allowed in the Valley West if you initially followed the current interpretation or the current code definition.
Correct.
There's one space open in Valley West. If that was to be applied for and taken, right, then that would leave 6 potentially, as this council would like to define, 6 in the Valley West area. When we come back with then a code amendment, it would be to limit Valley West to 6 or another number that they chose, but it couldn't be less than 6 because you would have 6, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And if the resolution to that, if you do not wish to see more than the existing 5, including Chester's, we'd have to put a moratorium until that regulation was adopted. Does that make sense? Okay. For the Papa Murphy's, I think I heard a clear majority of folks that said, look, that's a restaurant. It should be defined as a restaurant. And so again, that's going to require a code interpretation that's going to require a code amendment. We're going to have to amend the code to include Papa Murphy's. And I have some creative ideas how we can do that will exclude those other business types, as I'd mentioned before. If we adopt a code interpretation now that strictly reads the code and doesn't allow for additional factors to weigh into that code interpretation, Papa Murphy's would not currently be defined as a restaurant, and Subway would be allowed to open in Uniontown Shopping Center until such time as we redefine through that code amendment that Papa Murphy's is now included. But if you eliminate the geography, if that's the direction that you're heading, that you eliminate the geography, there's little risk in doing that, because at the end of the day, you would have now 3 in the Uniontown where currently 2 are allowed. So that's sort of the nuance that we're playing with here. If we make the code interpretation as outlined that neither Papa Murphy's nor Chester's is currently defined as a restaurant or formula restaurant, then we initiate the code amendment to then define them as restaurants. The end result will be 6 in Valley West, 3 in Uniontown, and 1 open and available somewhere else in the city.
Or not.
Or not, if you change the cap. Yeah, if you reduce the cap.
It'd still be at 9. Like at that, you would be at 9.
Right, because Chester's is now a restaurant.
Yeah.
You would be at 9.
I know you totally lost me now.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I forgot about Chester's. Denny's is closed. Right now we have Denny's and Subway is closed. And so if we make the interpretation, as I've outlined, that neither Chester's nor Papa Murphy's is currently defined as a restaurant, the 2 restaurants, one in Valley West, one in Uniontown, could open today under our current regulation. Then we could do a code amendment that would redefine both Chester's Chicken and Papa Murphy's and the like to be restaurants. And you would still have the existing total 9 restaurants that are under the existing cap carried forward in the future, but without the geographies. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I do support the idea of having if we're going to talk about doing when we talk about eliminate the geographies to put Valley West in its own zone. So it'd be my only addition to that.
Yeah, and to limit the Valley West to 6. No more than 6 in Valley West.
Let's see, Councilmember Atkins-Salazar.
I just wanted to bring up about Valley West. It is obviously heavier with the formula restaurants, but we need to remember that it's also our hotel zone. And so there are a lot of people staying in hotels there. And as opposed to in our downtown. So I think that that's part of the reason of why those restaurants choose to go into that area.
Yeah, the quick food for travelers and, you know, things being open later as well is definitely a factor there. And I think that's a really, really good point to bring up as well. But again, we're looking at, like, you know, just basically adding one more to a given area or not, basically. We're very, I mean, it's not gonna, but what concerns me is then if we're not defining places like Papa Murphy's or Chester's as restaurants, then, you know, what's going to stop another Papa Murphy's from opening in the Valley West Shopping Center, or, you know, the Chevron in Arcata to have a Chester's chicken or an Aztec grill or whatever it might be, you know? So I think having some definition of those things is going to be important just for the work. But then I guess we are already at it. But no, they wouldn't count towards that cap number because they're not a formula. So then, you know, just kind of the worry of opening that floodgate, I guess, if we're not counting those things.
Right. The new ordinance would count them as such.
Yeah, that's what I thought I heard. So just temporarily, they wouldn't be counted.
Right.
And then he'd come back with the new ordinance that would count it.
And frankly, if we had a flood of Papa Murphy's and Chester's chickens that were trying to come in the next couple of months, then I would come back and say, we need to implement a moratorium because word got out and things went crazy.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Thank you for clarifying that for me.
Okay, is there a motion that we should prepare right now as a counselor? Do you feel you have enough direction to bring something back?
I think I have direction. I'm going to complete my interpretation that Papa Murphy's and Chester's are not currently defined as restaurants, and indicate in that interpretation that the intent is to bring back an ordinance to the council as soon as possible to rectify that eliminates the geographies, limits in Valley West, and eliminate or prohibits in the central business district.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks everyone for talking that through. And now I'm still thinking about the hot dog being a sandwich. You really messed with me there.
Sorry.
It's a good question. It's a good, like, icebreaker question.
We should vote on it.
You know, I think that's what the people want. And they want us to vote on that. Okay, and with that, we will move on to oral and written communications, where the public too can weigh on this or any other topic they'd like to bring to us. So this is time for the people to address the council on matters that are not on tonight's agenda. So please raise your hand if you are on the Zoom webinar, or press *9 if you are on a phone line and you would like to make a public comment. Speakers are limited to 2 minutes. When it is your time for public comment, the clerk will unmute you and invite you to speak. Do we have any public comment?
It does not look like we have any public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll move on to council and staff reports. Are there any staff updates?
No staff updates tonight.
Okay, Vice Mayor Watson, any updates from you?
No updates.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar?
Nothing to report.
Councilmember Goldstein?
No updates, thanks.
Councilmember Schaefer?
No updates, thank you.
Okay, and the only update I want to make is, as you all probably know, now with the COVID-19 vaccine, it is currently available to 16 and older, and we actually have a vaccination site at the Arcata Community Center. So there are lots of appointments still available, I hear. So folks should, you can sign up for appointments. It's myturn.ca.gov, or you can also go to the federal website Vaccine Finder, which will also include, different pharmacies that are also administering the vaccine. This is all just really important for us to get that. If you've been wanting to get the vaccine, now's a great time to do it. So just want to let people know that resource is there. I know we were in short supply for a long time, but now it's readily available. So people should definitely take advantage of it. So please spread the word. and not COVID. Don't spread COVID, spread the word about the vaccine. Okay, let's see, no dates of future meetings. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Take care.